Sweden is a country that built its reputation on diplomacy, values, and strong institutions. Yet it also made a historic security choice by joining NATO. So what does Sweden see when it looks at Bosnia and Herzegovina in 2026? What does support actually mean? And what needs to change here if the EU path is to become more than a slogan? I'm Sead Turčalo. This is Touch on Net podcast. With us is Ambassador of Sweden to Bosnia, Helena Lagerlöf. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Vala.
Before we start, let me set the frame for our viewers. Bosnia and Herzegovina sits in a region where the EU is once again thinking geopolitically, where security, democratic resilience, and enlargement are increasingly connected. Sweden is now part of NATO, and Sweden is also a strong advocate of European integration and rule of law standards. So, I'd like to talk to you in three layers. What Sweden wants for Bosnia and Herzegovina, what Bosnia and Herzegovina must deliver, and what is realistically possible in the next few years on the EU track, on security, and on the everyday life questions that decide whether people stay or leave the country. When you look at Bosnia and Herzegovina today, what is the one thing outsiders most often misunderstand in Bosnia?
Yes, I'm a very positive person. In my personality. So I think that one thing that is always mentioned when it comes to Bosnia and Herzegovina, is the complexity of the country, of its constitution. But I would like to say that instead of seeing this complexity only as an obstacle, I would like to see that in the last 30 years, so much have been achieved despite this complex constitution and setup of the country. That's a misunderstanding that I...
What do you think are the most underestimated strengths of this country?
That the people in Bosnia Herzegovina are very good at finding solutions, despite this complexity.
You mean probably the ordinary people in Bosnia Herzegovina who are able to find solutions?
Yes,
better than those who make decisions.
Yes, and also that the people of Bosnia Herzegovina are very resilient. I think for politicians, sometimes they find solutions, but very often we also know that they don't. I think this complexity of the country can actually be used in both as something in both
as vulnerability and as a strength.
Yes.
Yeah. Coming to your position as the ambassador of Sweden to Bosnia and Herzegovina, what are your top priorities as Sweden's ambassador in Sarajevo?
The relationship between Sweden and Bosnia and Herzegovina is very strong and has been strong for decades. We have a big diaspora in Sweden. We have more than 100,000 people, more or less, calling both Bosnia, Herzegovina and Sweden their home countries. And that is something that we are very proud of. And also these people are completely integrated in the Swedish society as politicians, parliamentarians. They run businesses. I mean, they are as the Swedish, but at the same time still consider themselves Bosnians. And that, of course, is something that we want to preserve, but also to build on. Apart from that, I mean, the human relationship and connections, our support is to make sure that Bosnia and Herzegovina continues on its EU path. We still have development cooperation, so we invest Swedish taxpayers' money in Bosnia and Herzegovina to try to support these EU processes. And so that's, of course, a really strong priority. Ideally, we would also like for Bosnia and Herzegovina to join NATO. And on top of that, of course, to promote Swedish businesses and Swedish Bosnian business opportunities is also something that we think it's good for Sweden, it's good for Europe, and it's good for Bosnia and Herzegovina.
And if you had to define like success by the end of this year, what would be the one concrete result you would like to see here in the country?
That we have had the first intergovernmental intergovernmental conference, which is a very important step on the next big step on the path towards the European Union for Bosnia and Herzegovina. I think that would be the key.
Do you mean if our viewers wants to track progress with one simple indicator, it would be then the real opening of the accession talks with the Bosnia and Herzegovina? And what about the rule of law progress? What would rule of law progress, we very often mention it, but what would look like in daily life? One example that you would think people would recognize?
That is something, this is an area where Sweden is also investing. We have a Swedish judge, and we have a cooperation between HJPC and the Swedish equivalent, where we have both experts here working in the organization, but we also support HJPC financially to strengthen the rule of law in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And one thing that we focus on is the efficiency of the courts. That when you file a complaint, that you can see that there is progress. It's not only ends up in a pile of other unresolved complaints, but that there is actually a process and that it's being investigated. Maybe you don't like the outcome, but that's the law. But at least it doesn't end up somewhere on a shelf to just waiting, but that the legal system and the rule of law works and that it is efficient. I think that's really something from what we understand and also through our close collaboration with HJPC, that is something that really matters to people.
Continuing on this path of Sweden's support to Bosnia and Herzegovina, most of us see Sweden as a principled actor. But in Bosnia and Herzegovina, principles can become quite abstract. What does Swedish support mean in practice? Where do you believe Sweden has real leverage?
I think we like, there are many ways that we try to support, but continuing, as you say, on the HJPC topic, I think if you want to strengthen the rule of law here, I think one good way of doing that is to have experts talking to experts. So then you have judges from Bosnia and Herzegovina talking to Swedish judges instead of talking to Swedish diplomats. I mean, they have so much in common. They run their courts, they face the same challenges trying to implement the laws of each respective countries. So there is a lot to talk about, and there is mutual learning. So we don't only have the experts coming, the Swedish legal experts coming to Bosnia and Herzegovina, but we also have judges, legal experts from Bosnia and Herzegovina visiting courts in Sweden, visiting the enforcement agency. So building on that, we think is a really good methodology of cooperation. And we do that also. We've done it with the Swedish tax authority, also with the National Gender Equality Agency. So we try to have this kind of exchange in different areas of the administration.
Yeah. Besides this strong focus on justice reforms and this kind of support, what's about areas? Other areas where you think Swedish support can make some difference, or where do you think this kind of support would make the biggest difference in terms like anti-corruption, media freedom, education, local development?
I think that when it comes to anti-corruption, media freedom, freedom of expression, that is also an areas where Sweden has strong support and where we have invested heavily, and that support is very much. It's of course working with the authorities, but one here very important actors. It's the civil society and the civil society organizations. They are absolutely crucial. To ensure freedom of expression, media freedom, because their role in Bosnia-Herzegovina, in Sweden, and in all democratic societies is to hold governments to account. So their role is crucial, and we invest a lot in cooperating with them here.
How do you see media freedom?
Media freedom. I mean, if you look at the statistics, both from Transparency International and other organizations, we know that Bosnia-Herzegovina is backsliding, and that is of course something that we would like be able to help change that trend, for it to move up again, but it's also part of a global trend where the media landscape is very divided. So people of certain political beliefs, they only see media that confirms their opinion, but that's not unique for Bosnia-Herzegovina. It exists here very strongly, I think, but it also exists in I mean, we know in the US, in other countries.
I hear some people here often, like when we discuss the role of international community, etc., saying, okay, international partners talk about values, but everyone has interests. And where do values meet hard interest for Sweden and Bosnia-Herzegovina? Or let me ask it directly. What is Sweden trying to protect here? Stability, democratic institutions, European security, the future of young people, or all of that together?
I would say all of that. You cannot, because they're all interconnected. Because if you have, we want Bosnia-Herzegovina, if you look at the map, it's in Europe. And we share the same history, we share the same values, despite what some politicians sometimes say in their political discourse. We very strongly feel, if you look at the Bosnian voters, the Bosnian population, we very much share the same values in Europe with Sweden and with Bosnia-Herzegovina. And I think that the European Union is one way of ensuring that, to consolidate that platform of values. And I also think, I'm convinced that if we make sure that Bosnia-Herzegovina continues on its EU path, then also the young population will stay, because they want to join the European Union. The majority of the population want to join the European Union.
You certainly visit local communities in Bosnia-Herzegovina, and when you look at these local communities, what's the best example you have seen in Bosnia-Herzegovina? An initiative, one municipality, or a reform effort where you thought this is what actually we should support, or this is what European standards look like in practice?
Wow, that's a different. I mean, there are so many examples. But I think I really enjoy traveling the country, and when I visit municipalities to visit many of the projects that Sweden is supporting, what I think is really positive is to see that the politicians at the local level, how everyone, in the best case scenarios, when they come together, politicians with local institutions, with civil society organizations, to try to resolve real everyday problems of the population in their municipalities. I find that really rewarding. And also when they do that with other neighboring municipalities, especially if it's across the entity line. So it doesn't really matter. When you listen to the politicians at the national level, they are very sometimes focused on reinforcing the differences between the three ethnic groups. But if you go out at the local level, you visit the municipalities, you see that many politicians are committed to do is to resolve the everyday problem and challenges of people, and it doesn't matter the ethnicity.
And if you compare your experience with the I would say national or state level politics in Bosnia and Herzegovina and municipality level politics and the relationships between the ordinary people, how do you see it? And how do you actually if someone in Sweden asks you about Bosnia and Herzegovina, which very often seems on the brink of the conflict if you actually listen to the discourses of the politicians, how do you explain this kind of differences?
Then I also use the word complexity, because Bosnia and Herzegovina are all these things kind of in a combination at the same time. But I do think that, and that because Sweden has financial support, because our development corporations, because of the programs and projects that we support here, that gives me an opportunity to travel a lot in the country. And that's really where I feel there is so much positive happening. And sometimes I feel that that's very far away from the discourse by the politicians at the national level. So we must also, as diplomats, not only stay here in Sarajevo and only listen to this discourse. We also really need to go out, meet people all over the country, because that's when we get the positive examples of everything that is happening. And it's quite disconnected to the political discourse sometimes. I mean, there are many municipalities in Bosnia and Herzegovina, so of course you have the whole spectra, but I do think there are many positive examples around the country.
And going from the local level to national level and to the EU again, the EU decided to give us a green light for accession talks, but we all know opening the door is not walking through it. From the perspective of an EU member, what is the minimum credible package Bosnia and Herzegovina must deliver to keep its EU integration on the track?
Oh, that's a really difficult question to answer. That's because that's both a political process, but also the accession process is very technical. But I think that, I mean, to really speed up the accession process is one. Regional cooperation is also key. And then, of course, to make sure that we maintain the positive attitude and the pro-enlargement view. And that goes both for the people in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but that also very much goes for the citizens in Sweden and the citizens in the EU. For enlargement process to continue, we need the positive attitudes towards enlargement in both places. And we also had I'd just like to mention that there was a joint article by the foreign ministers of our two countries just before the end of 2025, which exactly talks about these three different elements that we think jointly that needs to happen for Bosnia and Herzegovina to progress.
And we very often mention the word complexity, and complexity in this country is real. But complexity can also be used as a shield. So what is the honest diagnosis? Is the core obstacle constitutional design of this country or political will?
I think it can be both, but I definitely think, I mean, we sometimes forget, but we have other countries that are part of the European Union that are very decentralized and very complex, but they are still fully functional EU members. So I think, as you say, one cannot hide behind. I mean, if there is a will, there is a way. So it's quite simple. I think we need to see that it's not going to happen overnight. It takes time, but what we want to see is that step by step there is progress. We need to make sure that we continue to move in the right direction, and that direction is towards Brussels, towards the European Union.
And EU increasingly, not only here, but I mean throughout the capital cities of EU countries, speaks the language of security, resilience, stability, strategic autonomy, that are the words of the end of 25 and the beginning of 2026. Do you agree that enlargement is now also kind of security policy for not only EU but Europe as the continent?
Yes, I think we can say that enlargement is also it's a geopolitical tool. We have seen that through enlargement we increase the stability for the new countries that become members, but also for those countries that are already members of the European Union. But of course, I mean, the main focus of the European Union for many years has been on economic prosperity. But if you strengthen the ties between neighboring countries in a region, it's of course less likely that these countries will pick fights between them. So economic prosperity and stability and security go hand in hand. Not always. I know there are exceptions, but that as a general rule, I still think it still applies.
And speaking not only as diplomat, as Swedish ambassador, but as someone who follows actually politics here and in the EU, do you mean that actually when the security discourse entered the enlargement and actually the President of EU Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, at the beginning told everyone that the new Commission is going to be a geopolitical one, etc., etc. What could it mean for Bosnia and Herzegovina? Does it mean more support or maybe stricter conditionality in the future?
That's very different, because that's a political. I mean, where?
That's why I actually like not only just your opinion, not really only as a diplomat.
Yeah, I think it will be. I think it will need to be both, because I mean there is. If you want to be part of, I mean, let's just hypothetically, let's call the European Union a club, and this club has certain rules, but you also get countries want to be part of that club because you get things. I mean, you get the country becomes richer and more stable, etc., etc. But of course there are certain rules and values. I think one key rule is the value-based union that the European Union is, and we are not. If you want to be a member, you need to apply those rules, and if you want to call that conditionality, then yes. But I think that Bosnia and Herzegovina again is completely capable of doing that, and I always try to emphasize over and over again that we know from opinion polls that the vast majority of the population of Bosnia and Herzegovina wants to join the European Union. So I think then it's a responsibility for the politicians to fulfill this wish of their voters.
And I'm certain that next to question that you actually like received this question by many of the citizens that you meet, because the people here are sometimes we're really tired of process without result when it comes to different integration processes. And what would you say to a citizen who asks, will the EU ever accept Bosnia, or will we stay in the waiting room forever?
I would turn that question around, because that's not it's like putting, as if it depended on us in the European Union. It doesn't. It depends on Bosnia and Herzegovina. The door is wide open. But we cannot, I mean, Bosnia and Herzegovina must itself walk in through that door. It cannot be done from anyone else. It can only be done by the country itself that wants to enter. Because if you ask the question like that, it sounds like if it was the responsibility of the European Union to make sure that Bosnia and Herzegovina enters. And of course it's a cooperation, because we very much like you to join. But we do everything in our power, financially, with expertise, diplomatically, to help you achieve that. But ultimately, the really hard work needs to be done by Bosnia and Herzegovina.
And let me again flip the lens. I mean, Bosnia and Herzegovina is often told what to do, and Bosnia and Herzegovina bears actually the responsibility, as you said, for what the country is doing on the EU path, because if you want to join the club, you have to fulfill certain requirements, actually, whether it's EU or any other, actually, organization or so. But what would you tell, or your country tell the EU to do differently if the goal is to keep Bosnia on a European trajectory?
Right now, I'm not entirely sure what that would be. I mean, there is a process also of looking at enlargement process. But I mean, I think if you look, for example, that the number one priority for Swedish foreign policy and for Swedish security policy is supporting Ukraine, and to increase. And despite the fact that Ukraine is fighting a war against the Russian aggression, they still make huge progress on their EU path, which is amazing. So if they can do it, I think also other enlargement countries can also do it.
Actually, we addressed the questions of our institutions and the complexity and political will, etc. But does the system here in Bosnia and Herzegovina reward compromise or reward obstruction? Just from your experience here.
I think it doesn't necessarily reward compromise. But I think you as a politician, politicians need to be brave, because in any democracy you can never reach your goals if you don't make compromises. But also, so politicians need to be brave. They need to they need to compromise, and then also the voters, in the ideal world, would then also that it needs to pay off for the politicians. So that needs to be rewarded also by the voters to make compromises. And we all know that with the constitution that exists here, it is challenging, but I think it's possible.
The international community here faces very often kind of dilemma. Too much intervention, and we have witnessed it over the years, can be seen as a delegitimization of any local ownership. On the other hand, too little allows dangerous erosion, and we have witnessed that too. How to balance those two principles? We know that the peace agreement in Bosnia and Herzegovina is an international one, that actually deriving from it there is certain delicate balance of responsibility between the international community in Bosnia and Herzegovina. But actually how to balance between this intervention that's sometimes needed and the fact if the intervention isn't there, that we very often witness erosion in Bosnia and Herzegovina.
I mean, that's that's the key question in all foreign policy, how to strike that balance. But I think that the approach from Sweden is and has I would say always is a dangerous word, but for decades it has been to very much try to support, but to always make sure that to be also very much in a listening mode, to be a partner with countries that we cooperate with. But it's a really difficult balance to strike. And as you say, Bosnia-Herzegovina is a relatively small country, but with a very big international presence. So here, whatever the international community does or does not do has a big impact. I mean, we know that through history.
And you also know that politics is about legitimacy. And coming to your experience with the country and in the country, what's your sense? Do people here still believe institutions can work for them?
That's very difficult for me to answer. I think because that's so individual. I don't know, maybe people who leave, they lost that hope. People who stay, but maybe I'm oversimplifying it. I really don't. Or even if they don't believe that the institutions can deliver for them, they are ready to stay and fight for the change. But that you would have to ask someone else. It's difficult for me to say.
And your country decided after a long tradition of non-alignment to join NATO. What is the key lesson from that decision that matters for small states like Bosnia-Herzegovina living in today's hard security environment?
The lesson for us is that in a hard security environment, as you say, we need to cooperate with others, that we are stronger together. Definitely. And for us, security-wise, with Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, that changed everything.
What would be a lesson for Bosnia-Herzegovina, for a country where the NATO is often discussed mostly through politics and through emotions, well, less through the benefits or at least a cost-benefit analysis?
But I think also if you do a cost-benefit analysis, you would see that cooperating with others, I mean, be it regional cooperation, because the same as I mean, Sweden, we are part of the Nordic countries. Also, Bosnia-Herzegovina is also part of a region. And what built the Swedish prosperity and very, I would say, resilient democracy in Sweden and the other Nordic countries, that was our regional cooperation. And I think the same goes for Bosnia-Herzegovina. The importance of cooperating with your neighbors, with other EU countries, with other allies. And then, of course, it's up to the people here I mean, do they want to be members of NATO? Do they want to be members of the European Union? And if that is the case, then that's what the politicians should do. So even if they do a cost-benefit analysis, I think we know, at least from where I'm standing, we know the answer to that.
Foreign influence, I mean, we mentioned the Russian aggression in Ukraine, and Russia is often treated here or considered as an actor, as even from my perspective as a researcher who exercised malign influence. But I'm not going into like foreign malign influence as such, but more to it that in Europe societies are debating disinformation and the limits of free speech. Sweden has a strong democratic tradition. How do you protect democratic space without creating censorship or mistrust? Because, I mean, this fine line between free speech and disinformation is, in today's world, very hard actually to go and to maintain.
Yes, I think that, I mean, Sweden, we have a very, as you say, we have a very strong tradition when it comes to freedom of expression. It's part of our constitution. We have one of the world's oldest legislations on this topic. And that has always been for scientists, for politicians to strike that line. But I mean, it's really that to speak freely, to write freely. But of course, you need to have an open debate, so you can express your opinion. But of course, we also need to adapt. For example, when all media it was TV, it was radio, it was television, then everything moved over to social media. Then we also need to develop our legislation to see what is freedom of expression on social media, what is acceptable, what is not acceptable. But I also think here the education system, schools, it's so important that students learn that at school, to be critical thinkers. You cannot just to make sure that I mean, I have 3 children myself who just the last one the youngest one will graduate from high school this year, and through the whole of their school time in school, they have been so much trained in this critical thinking, of making an assessment of all information that they receive. They need to understand, why is this person telling me this, or why am I seeing this reel describing that? Why does this pop up? Why do I have the algorithms that I have on my phone? We need to be critical thinkers, all of us. Maybe it's more difficult for us, the older generation, which I call myself, because we didn't grow up. We were not born into this world of social media, and but our children, they did. They never knew anything else, and we need we need to educate them, and sometimes they need to educate us to become critical thinkers, to make sure, because that's the only way that we can make sure that we continue to have freedom of expression, freedom of speech, freedom of opinion.
And let's talk about the future of the country of Bosnia in the most concrete terms, people. Bosnia has a serious demographic decline, more deaths than births. In 2024, there were, according to the data that I received, 10,000 more deaths than births in the country, and it's an increase compared to the 2023. Do you see demography as an economic issue, or is it maybe also a national security issue for such a small country like Bosnia-Herzegovina? And where do you think actually the policy should start? Services, since we spoke about the institutions, or maybe just a belief that change is possible?
Ooh, again, I think it's a complex question, but I think you need a bit of a combination of all the things that you mentioned. There is no one recipe or only one solution. I think you need to combine.
My question was more to bridge to a question, to something you mentioned at the beginning, to the fact that Sweden has a large community of people with roots in Bosnia-Herzegovina, and I want actually to hear your opinion. How do you see that human bridge? What can be done to transform diaspora links into skills, investments, educational exchange, and civic confidence that might then affect this attitude of those people who decide to leave?
No, I think like any citizen in any part of the world, there needs to be economic prosperity. You need to be able to have a job, to make a living for yourself, for your family. There needs to be business opportunities, decent jobs, etc., etc. And I think that, at least what we are seeing, that there are a number of people from Swedish diaspora who are now maybe opening their own businesses here, or setting up a daughter company to a bigger company that they have. And I think with more and more of that to create these business opportunities for here, I think it's absolutely crucial. But then that also goes hand in hand with as you say, anti-corruption, with rule of law, because you also need to, for any investor, be it someone from a diaspora, or be it Volvo or Ericsson, or I mean the big Swedish companies, you always want to minimize the economic risk, and of course it's the risk is less if you invest in a country that has rule of law, that is less corrupt, etc. So legislation and political decisions also here goes hand in hand. If you want to change demography, if you want more diaspora to come back and open their businesses from Sweden, from Germany, from Austria, from other countries, you also need to have these other things that in place, and which then also helps the country on the EU path. So it's all connected.
And if a talented 22-year-old in Bosnia, in a community that you visit, tells you, I'm leaving because nothing changes, what would you say to him or her?
That's not really for me to question. Maybe they have very good reasons for, so I can't put into question their decision, but of course I can always say that I wish that people, not only in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but in all countries, that they stay. But because I do believe in this country, and I believe in Bosnia and Herzegovina as part of the bigger European family, definitely.
Ambassador, I want to end with two short messages. One message to Bosnia and Herzegovina's political leaders. What do they need to do now, not in theory, but in practice? That's first. And the one message to citizens watching, what should they demand and what should they protect?
The politicians, I think they need to sit down together. They need to come up with a plan. They say that they want to join the European Union. Most politicians say that. I think they need I would love, if I were a voter in Bosnia and Herzegovina, I think I would like to see their plan on how they actually intend to do that, step by step. What's their plan to make sure? Because it's really up to, it doesn't depend on if only this other person or this other organization, if only EU did that or the opposition did that. No, it's really, everyone can contribute with something. So you sit down and you see what can I, from the part of my political party, from wherever my position where I'm sitting, how can I contribute to make sure that we continue on the EU path and that we make sure it happens. I would like to see that. As a citizens, to cherish their resilience and their diversity and just continue with what they're doing, to ask from their political leaders to make sure they deliver on the wish of the people of the country.
Ambassador Lagerlöf, thank you for a serious conversation. That was Sweden's ambassador to Bosnia and Herzegovina. We discussed the EU path, security and resilience, and the demographic reality shaping Bosnia's future.